supply that the plan as modified would identify for a 5-year period and for the plan, the modified plan period as a whole. So 5-year supply first. Just before we look at the 5-year supply from the 1st of April 2026, which is what I'm going to focus on, could we just clarify what the latest trajectory shows, which is in exam 54, which is the 19th of August version?
So we submitted last Friday.
Yes, I've got that.
Oh, yeah.
About the 5-year supply from 2026 onwards, some of the sites.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to go through those shortly.
Okay.
But I'm just taking a step back.
Okay.
If I wanted to decide what this land supply from 5-year supply from 2023 onwards was, i.e. the sort of the base date of the plan, which in some examinations in the past was the sort of approach taken. Could we, what the trajectory that I have, I haven't asked you to update it and take account of the latest information, but the trajectory we have from August, I think shows a total of 3,056. And the 1st of April 2023. The figure, I think, I don't know if I added it myself or was a figure I'd got from you, but 3,056 compared to a requirement of 2,704. Maybe you want me to leave that?
3195? No, that's
3195 you make it, yeah?
Yeah. From exam.
No, well, that's the figure from 2026 onward, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, I was just having just a slightly different exercise for completion. Was that what the figure was? I can leave it with you. I'd got a figure of 3056 from between.
Yeah, that's correct. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. So that demonstrates a 5-year, from that trajectory shows a 5-year supply from that date onward.
Yes.
Okay, so let's move on then. When we previously discussed the 5-year supply, we did it in the context of the revised NPPF published in December last year, which whilst we weren't examining the plan in that context, that would have implications for development management, because that version of the NPPF would mean that you wouldn't have to identify for development management purposes a 5-year supply if I concluded that the plan identifies a 5-year supply for the 5 years subsequent to adoption. Yeah, so that's the exercise we went through. And I'm intending to go through it again because I asked you, or no, you clarified in exam 53 that whilst the new draft NPPF published in July would remove that development management approach in the December 2023 version of the NPPF, the new draft NPPF still talks about having a 5-year supply from adoption, subsequent to adoption. Yeah.
Yeah.
So irrespective of what your development management approach would be in the context of what national policy is, it's still appropriate for me to consider and conclude on whether the plan identifies a 5-year supply from the intended date of adoption. Your council agrees, yeah? So that's from 2026. So we'll still go through that exercise again. So based on the August trajectory, there was the supply of 3195. Yep.
Right.
Yeah. And so that was a surplus of 491 or a 5.9 year supply, however you want to express it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay. So that's where we were at then. Prompted probably by me and Provision's analysis of sites in their further written statement. I asked you to respond to the issues raised. And in so doing, I think what you've done is take account of information that's become available since the 1st of April 2024.
That's correct.
Yeah, because it had been raised by Provision and some others about what the latest position is on the 5-year supply.
Yeah, correct.
So we're in this never-ending game, potentially. We could do this forever, couldn't we? Of looking at what the latest information is. So anyway, you did that, so thank you. And you went through each of the sites that have been raised, looking at what the latest evidence tells you, as opposed to what, in particular, the sites that have been. So I suppose it wasn't a comprehensive exercise, was it, that you've undertaken here? It was responding to the sites that had been brought to your attention by Provision.
Yeah, that's correct. It was also, there was a planning appeal last week whereby the 5-year supply was challenged. And so I think the sites within the written statement were also the ones challenged within that.
But we haven't got a comprehensive reassessment, have we?
No.
So I've got to make a decision really as where we're kind of drawing the line on this, whether we're saying, look, we'll use the 1st of April 2024 base date and take that as the position, or we kind of somehow do this exercise of, because we're gazing into the future anyway, aren't we? So it seems a bit of a, it's a difficult exercise to sort of reconcile with what national policy is expecting us to do. So anyway, let's do what we've done, which is go through the sites that have been brought to my attention, your attention, through whatever means. The first one we've already discussed was North East Thatcham, where the latest information suggests the completions in the 5-year period from 2026 is lower than you previously assumed. I think you've accepted that. So that's our first one. The 4 proposed allocations, new allocations we've talked about today, and they each contribute to the 5-year supply, either the total capacity or in the case of one, I think is 150 out of the 250 or so. We've talked about obviously the developer interest in those, and you explain why you think, and we've got evidence from the developers to suggest that. So I've got that information. Whether that represents clear evidence, that's the conclusion I can come to. We've got it, which brings us on to the sites that Provision in particular queried, and others have referred to some of these. So you in reassessing all of that based on what they had said, but also your latest evidence that you've done for an appeal or whatever else. The net effect of it, so some would be delivering more sooner, some would be delivering less. But the net effect would increase your supply from 3195 to 3402. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. So that's the position now. So that would represent 6.3 years or a surplus of 26%, I think. So that's where we're at. I'll go through them with you just quickly to make sure I understand what the position is, and then we can come back and get views from others. But there's a clutch of them that the issue seemed to be around the mitigation required for the nutrient neutrality, which we discussed at a previous hearing session about what the national position was in terms of the legislation and the policy about making assumptions about the sewage treatment works upgrades at a particular date and all that. So that's the context for this. But basically what you've said, I think, about all of these, I mean, there's 2 different catchments and wastewater treatment works, I think, aren't there? But the same position basically applies in conjunction with your ecology colleagues or whatever. You're still firmly convinced that actually that's not going to hold up development beyond the trajectory that you've assumed back in August. If anything, the position's improved rather than gone backwards. Yeah, so I don't need to go through each of them individually. You made the same point. And in some cases, there is some more site-specific information that's available about land being available for on-site or adjoining mitigation, etc. So your point of view is firmly you've got the evidence there. That's not an issue that's going to hold up those 5 or 6 sites or whatever. I'll let Provision come back on these. And we'll go through the order. I think you'd set them out in which case if you wish to go through. In terms of RSA 14, this is Lynch Lane, Lambourne. That the nutrient neutrality issue, don't need to do it. You acknowledge that there isn't a permission, but what you're saying here is that you've had pre-application discussions. It's 60 dwellings, and the delivery from 28, 29, and that can deliver by 2031.
That's right. So they've confirmed to us, the developer, that they're kind of actively preparing a planning application. They're undertaking pre-application advice. Quite a lot of the technical studies are being prepared. They've appointed planning consultants.
Okay, so the fact there isn't a permission, but that's not a reason. The other small site in Lambourne, you acknowledge the supply should be reduced by 3 because of an alternative scheme that's been put forward. So that's one of the ones that reduces slightly. RSA 20, again, it's a small site, Hermitage. The permissions, I think Provision says it's set to expire on the 8th of October. Yep, which around about now. But you say, do you maintain there's a realistic prospect that the site will deliver 16 dwellings by 2031? Why, on what basis is that?
So there is a non-material amendment made to that extent permission. So that will basically make that permission not expiring. So we still,
Right.
yeah, we're still confident that it will come forward.
So the applicant, so they got permission 3 years ago or 5 years ago? 3 years ago. And it's going to expire, but they're making a non-material amendment which gives it a new life.
Yeah, to make the permission extend.
Yeah, extend. But what's the actual physical thing that's held up development for the last 3 years? Why hasn't it been implemented? And what to make you think there's a change in circumstance that it will now?
So basically, that's really in relation to nutrient neutrality
Okay.
solution. But like
Okay.
now, like things have made progress.
That was holding things up,
Yeah,
but now they've got another 3 years and they still want to develop it.
of course, yeah.
And you, as a planning authority, think that that issue won't hold it up?
Yeah.
Okay, and there's no other obstacles?
No.
Okay. Thank you. And then we come on to, no, sorry, that's then another one in Hermitage, it's 21. This is one that TA Fisher has outlined permission for. What's the dispute here? Remind me.
It's all in relation to nutrient neutrality.
Yeah.
Because there's no mitigation measures in place, it shouldn't be included.
Even though they're promoting it. Right, okay, well, we'll get their view on that, but you're saying that isn't an issue to hold it up? And you're not aware of anything else, but there may be. Okay. Right, thank you. So the assumption about the the neighbourhood plan contributions, 25 in Lambourne and 55 in Hungerford, you've updated me on the progress for these. And again, you're satisfied that these sites are likely to be included in these neighbourhood plans.
That's right.
There could be things that actually, are some of them in settlement boundaries anyway?
Yes, so with Lambourne, 2 of the proposed allocations within the settlement boundary and 1 immediately adjacent to the
So
boundary.
if you had a planning application in any way, that you could grant permission on these in
Yes.
advance anyway. And you're satisfied that there is, well, there's a process, but presumably they've been promoted, these sites,
They have, yes.
to you
That's-
and to the.
and to the neighbourhood
Parish
planning
Council.
group.
Yeah, and the 2 sites in Hungerford that have been brought forward, you don't see any significant issues on those?
No.
And they collectively would actually deliver more than 55, would they? Or would it be
I think
55?
it's about 55.
55, that's the 2 of them
Yeah.
together. Okay. Well, I'll let provision come back on these. Now, Sandalford Park, the ever fluctuating Sandalford Park, east and west. So, on the basis of information subsequent to the 1st of April 2024, for the 5-year supply, you're saying actually things have improved from your previous trajectory, is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Because of the progress on the applications in particular, or the developer timetables?
I think it's both like the progress made on the reserve matters application and also from developers estimation of the leading time.
Okay. So on there, you get an increase of 150 on Sandalford Park East
Yes.
and 120 increase in Sandalford Park West.
Yeah, sorry, can I mention also the east is the builder rate, so the developer confirmed they can achieve a 120 dwellings per annum, which is higher in the trajectory in exam 54. So there's an increase in builder rate as well.
In the what, sorry?
In the builder rates.
Yes, but that still leads to the net increase of the 150.
Yeah, that's correct.
But that's because of the start time and the build rate
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
Okay. In terms of the contribution to the overall supply for those two sites, we'll come on to later, but on this 5-year supply, you're wanting to take account of subsequent information since April 2024, or you are referring to it. The argument for the not reducing the contribution for the overall supply for the plan period, I think, was based on the 1st of April 2024 information.
So are you talking about the east?
Or both, I think.
Both.
We can come back to it because it's looking at the longer term supply. But what I thought what I'm trying to understand is the purpose of 5-year supply, you are drawing my attention to more recent information that confirms an earlier start and faster build rates, therefore a bigger contribution to 5-year supply. But I think that same subsequent information, does it not actually reduce the capacity of the sites in the long term? Because they're both developers' intentions are to go for a lower level of overall development.
It's the developers' submissions that would be a lower level of development, and the council haven't seen any evidence to justify a lower level of development.
Okay. But in other cases, you'll go on what the developers' intentions are, but it's a matter of the clarity around those intentions.
Looking at kind of maximising making effective use of land on the site.
But the principle of taking account of further information since the 1st of April 2024, you are accepting by referring to it in terms of the 5-year supply.
Yeah, and as a matter of planning judgment, on one side of the argument, accepting what the developer says, but in relation to
longer term.
Yes, not accepting it because no evidence has been brought forward to us at this point.
Okay, understood. So we'll come back to that. So anyway, in terms of the contribution to 5-year supply, that's a significant increase at Samsford Park because of the way things have progressed and there. Okay, thank you. In terms of the RSA1 at Newbury College, there is an outline application and that's being recommended for approval for 31, which actually leads to a net increase of 16 on your 5-year supply. Yeah. Then we come on to some commitments that aren't allocations in the plan. The first ones, we talked about these before, I think, Faraday Road, Kelvin Road. This is one where the council's got an ownership interest, but it's a leasehold and a freehold. So is it a slightly complicated ownership issue or is it?
The council own the freehold, but part of the site is, I think, leased out.
For a long term or a short term? Or is that the issue?
In short term.
But okay, well, leaving that aside. But anyway, I think you accept that the extant permission has a hotel and an office component, and that development doesn't appear to be viable or likely to come forward in itself at the moment. So it would be an alternative scheme, or is that not?
So I think our position is still deliverable within the 5-year post-adoption because it's a extended implemented planning permission for mixed use, including 150 units. So this is a legal fallback position that will be a material consideration in any future planning applications.
But are you saying that someone is suggesting that the scheme that has permission doesn't appear to be demand for it at the moment? Are you accepting that? Yeah,
and then actually the agent has communicated to a council witness in the recent appeal, so it's come from that appeal. And the agent also said that the scheme could deliver units in around 30 months from now at a rate of 60 to 30 market units, and then has provided details around that delivery. So that's why make the council thinks that there still remains realistic prospects that will come forward within the 5-year post-adoption.
Okay, so that would be based on a new planning permission and the land being sold off in plots, is that right? So there'd need to be a new permission.
Yeah, there would need to be a new permission, but Carter Jonas, who were the agents, had given information to the council about how there's interest in the site and how they see current marketing and how they see development, and gave some quite specific timelines in relation to it. Because of the timelines that Ms. Coe's just outlined to you, given that we're looking 2 years post-adoption, council still considers it to be doable.
Okay. So the extant permission is a bit of a red herring because you're accepting that although it's a because of the fallback.
I think it's a red herring, but it is a material consideration
is.
because of the fallback position that it gives.
Yeah, but the more important point is that there is that the leasehold, the council's willing to sell the freehold. The leasehold isn't an obstacle to it being sold in the short to medium term.
I think it adds a layer of complexity to it, but it's not a showstopper in terms of this site.
So, and the fact that it's being actively marketed and the Carter owners say that there is interest from potential developers, that leads you to think, well, we've got long enough time to develop this site out. Okay, and the capacity would still be, what was the 160, is that somebody's laptop about to her?
So the current permission includes residential units of 160.
Is that flats?
I think it is flats, yeah.
Right.
Because there was a mixed use. So in terms of what might come forward, the council's not sure what that mix or scale might be, but actually Carter Jonas is saying they think it's got a combined capacity of around 400 units. Council isn't saying put 400 in, the council's sticking with 160.
So that 400 again would be some sort of flatted development. Is someone drilling their way in or out or? Okay, right. Yeah, okay. Right, okay. So, okay, that's a situation where in effect we're in a position of, you know, it's being marketed and it's a scheme would have to come forward, a new scheme. Right. The Broadway buyer site, the council accepts a reduction in this of 36. Is that right?
Yes, but indeed, we have received new information yesterday.
Right.
So the council does now believe that the site is deliverable 5 year post-adoption. So there has been an application to Ferry to make one payment on first occupation rather than commencement. The council solicitor was chased for response on this on 23rd of September, and the council solicitor responded on 24th of September, which shows that there's current extent permission is progressing, as the solicitors is still retaining, and then they chase the council. So now we have the knowledge of that latest development, so we consider it's that 36 should not be considered now.
Okay, so the 72 for the permission, you think it still
Yes,
be
but that's-
achievable in the 5 years?
Yeah, so it's just a 36 in that 5 year period.
Oh, right.
Yes.
36 in the 5 years, but
Yeah.
the 72 overall.
Yes.
Okay, so there is a reduction in 36 in the 5 year supply.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Understood. The next one, buy a house, Strawberry Hill, 141. That was not assumed to contribute to the 5 year supply. So that, I don't need to think that, but that's actually being expected to be completed more sooner.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Right. Okay, well, Provision, do you want to, you've had a chance to read what the council said in response to the issues that you've raised and you've heard the discussion we've just had. Do you want to come back or add anything to any of that?
Yeah, there's a number of comments there that a little bit surprising. I might need a bit of unpicking. I don't know what's best, if to go through the same order or work backwards. But same order. So with the nutrient neutrality issue, I think the council's just said that it can use a section 96A non-material minor amendment to extend the life of the planning permission that expires in 6 days' time. RSA 20, land at Charlotte Close.
Sorry, on the what was in generation.
I am questioning. I just wondered if I can question them now, but it's because we represent Tia Fisher on their Hermitage site, which is also caught by the nutrient neutrality issue, and that's RSA 21. Okay. It's kind of helpful for me to give you the real example of what's happening. I think in terms of
yes, please, yeah, that's helpful.
Yeah, so Tia Fisher have achieved the outline planning permission on the allocated site, which is carried forward from the housing site allocations DPD. They submitted their reserve matters application in December 2021, and that application is still pending. It was caught by the nutrient neutrality issue in this area in March 22. TA Fisher submitted their nutrient solution to the council, which involves the package treatment plant, which on site, which is one of the nutrient solutions that's in the council's recently published solutions report. So that's one of the solutions. We've had no response from the council at all to that submission since June 23. Repeated requests for extensions of time and repeated requests and information related to the delay with the council's own phosphates calculator. The council in their response to you here, sir, say that the phosphates calculator has been published. That's correct. But on the 18th of September, it was confirmed that there was an error in that calculator and it's been withdrawn. And we've actually had an email today confirming it will be some months potentially until a new revised phosphates calculator is published. So again, that means that nothing can progress from TA Fisher's perspective on their application at the moment, because until the council can resolve its issues with its own phosphate calculator, it can't obviously calculate what the site's nutrient budget is. And so it can't, under the habitat regs, determine, the appropriate assessment in order to approve the reserve matters and discharge the conditions. So I know there's some criticism here of TA Fisher in terms of that they completed the developer form that feeds into the site deliverability form that feeds into the land supply, that they said the site was deliverable in 2026, 27. I mean, that would be brilliant. But the reason we can't deliver the site at the moment is because we're waiting for the nutrient solution and those issues to be resolved. So I don't want to muddy the local plan with a development management issue, but this is the issue, precisely this issue that's affecting all of these sites. And you need to be certain as to whether you include those sites in the 5-year supply and whether you can be certain that that issue would be resolved. And as we stand here today, I don't have that certainty as the agent acting on a live application.
Well, certainty is something that I never strive for.
Sorry, I'm probably muddying my terminology.
Realistic prospect is the test.
Realistic prospect in the definition of deliverable in the end. Sorry, muddling my terminology, but that's the test.
Yeah.
We're not saying that these sites won't ever come forward, but in terms of being certain as we sit, having a realistic prospect as we sit here today, that these sites will come forward in 26, 27, 2030, we just don't know.
Well, this is the thing, isn't it? We've got until 2031, haven't we, to consider whether there's a realistic prospect. So, and they're relatively small sites, but I'll take the point. So when you say the calculator was withdrawn and there could be several months delay, that's what the council has advised you.
Yes. So in the statement of common ground that was signed by the council on Friday in relation to the appeal, that is in there. The reference to the email on the 18th of September. It came from a planning officer called Cheyenne Kirby, if anybody wanted to check it. But she confirmed that there is an error. It's in relation to the SUDS tab, which is clearly one of the most significant tabs on the calculator, which produces, just as an example, on another application we're dealing with, it wasn't neutral under the natural income calculator. It was neutral under the council's calculator. Fantastic, but of course that's an error. So that's the issue, and we've had a further email today on that application to say it would be some weeks, some months before that's resolved. The officers don't know.
So that calculator is it's the principal known about obstacle at the moment. If the calculator was working, would your clients be in a position to progress that application then? Well, so are other uncertainties as well after that?
As far as I understand, no. The application, I believe, is otherwise acceptable, but there's a step-by-step approach. First, the calculator needs to be completed, and then our client's nutrient strategy, which we submitted in June 23, which we've been told the council can't look at until it has its solutions report, which it now has. That then needs to be considered.
And what? So if the calculator is working and you've got a strategy for your site or your clients have, that's the information that the council would need to put into its calculator.
Yes, well, the applicant completes the calculator.
Sorry,
but
okay.
Yes.
Between the council and the applicant and the calculator and the information that the applicant provides, that would give you a tick or not.
It would, yeah, so the calculator obviously confirms what the deficit or the impact is on phosphates. The mitigation solution should then make the development neutral. And at least that's our proposal for this particular site, because putting on a package treatment plant with you don't know all the details, but the enhanced cleaning system, what is eventually discharged is much cleaner than if everything just goes to sewage.
Yeah.
So that system means that our development would be neutral. If the council then assesses that, agrees that, they then complete the appropriate assessment. The appropriate assessment sent to Natural England. If Natural England then agree that the development is phosphate neutral, then there should be no barrier to issuing the planning permission. Our clients purchased the site outright with the outline application some years ago. It's been a long road to get here, but they're anxious to crack on. They are a house builder. But
yeah,
it's just how long all of that process will take. And I say, we've been hanging on since March 22.
Yeah, okay. And in terms, sorry, yeah, so the sequence of events after the calculator is in place and working, you've outlined, so thank you for that, that's helpful. And that could take a matter of weeks or months, but it shouldn't take a matter of years. Well,
it's very difficult. I mean, elsewhere in other districts where it's where you're caught by these issues.
Yeah.
I mean, it has been years.
But was there not a change when the legislation, or it was secondary legislation, wasn't it, that basically said the local planning authority should assume that the wastewater treatment works are at a certain level by a certain date? That has that changed things?
Well, there's still the requirement to complete the calculator. And
so that takes one thing away.
Yes.
But it doesn't solve it.
So I guess
this is still the process you have to go through.
Yes, so I think my understanding is it depends on if the calculator assumes those reductions in 25 and 2030 that have been referred to. I mean, presumably under the appropriate assessment, there could be some restriction on when the development could actually commence if it's reliant on being neutral on like a 2030.
Is that the date in the
Yeah, there's two dates for the different plants. But I'm no drainage expert, so I don't know whether the effect of a on-site package treatment plant would be reliant on off-site drainage upgrades work. So
or a combination of
beyond my skills.
No, okay.
But there is a sequence of events, and I think what needs to be got right is the phosphate calculator. That's what we've been waiting for since March 22, and we can't progress until that's right.
Okay, thank you very much. That's helpful. And as far as you understand it, that issue would affect these other sites that you've referred to that are in the catchments for the.
So, yes, sir. So that's kind of why I wanted to get to that one first, because I think that's the practical one to take back. I just, though, on RSA 20 and just what was said in terms of this permission that expires on the 8th of October. And if I've understood the response right, because there was a bit of a ripple that went around the planners in the room, that the council's saying that you can use the section 96A non-material amendment to extend the life of that permission that expires in 6 days' time. I don't think that's lawful. There's certainly some no's. But I mean, if that's the case, that certainly for example, T.A. Fisher's site, you know, that's being held up at the moment on discharge of conditions. Couldn't the same process then apply to release these sites? But I have to say, I don't think that's a lawful approach. And regulation 63 of the habitat regulations is quite clear that any person applying for a consent, and this is the issue that the CG and Fry case revealed. That's I think it's gone to the Supreme Court now. But it says that if you're applying for any consent, permission or other authorization, and the section 96A is kind of akin to that, that there must be an appropriate assessment done by the competent authority. The competent authority is the council. How can the council do an appropriate assessment on the nitrate issue if there isn't yet a solution? And there isn't going to be one in, well, unless something I don't know, but there isn't going to be one in 6 days' time.
Okay, understood. Thank you. Right, that was helpful to have that example worked through. Before we move on to, is there anything else on the phosphate and the nutrient neutrality? Because I think I may as well get a contribution from the council on that particular issue before we move on to some of the other things that you might want to respond to.
Thank you, sir. Yes, just to come up back on a couple of those quite important points. And I agree the way that the non-material amendment, what actually happened was described was not entirely helpful. That's not exactly the situation. So the non-material amendment enabled the phasing of the development to enable phase 1 to come forward or be implemented rather by the 8th of October. And phase 1 only included the access road. The appropriate assessment determined that that would not impact on nutrient neutrality, and that was agreed with Natural England. So that's hopefully clarified that particular point. The second,
so what you're saying is that in this particular circumstance, because of the non-material amendment and the relationship between the permission and the phasing, it would keep the whole permission alive.
It would in this case, because it would enable them to implement a permission that was going to expire on the 8th of October.
With the road?
Implement the permission, by implementing the works that wouldn't affect nutrient neutrality.
Okay, understood. Okay, so that's that particular issue. In terms of the calculator and the process thereafter.
So unfortunately, we did have an issue with SUDS tab that's rightly been described. It's not correct though that we have no calculator. We at the same time, as was explained in the email on the 18th of September, released a previous version of the calculator without the SUDS tab. So in this situation, this is for proposals that don't have sort of fully worked up SUDS proposals. So we've used a literature-based value in that case for SUDS contribution to a development. So we do have that version of the calculator. However, currently it is correct that if applicants would like to include specific SUDS proposals, they would have to use the Natural England one, but we do have a version of our calculator that is available and has been shown to decrease the amount of phosphorus mitigation required.
Okay, so in terms of these, you take this site, I don't know whether you've been involved in the last few years that's been described by Provision. There's been delays for this issue. Is your view then that actually, yes, of course, there have been issues and it has delayed it, but despite this calculator issue, there is a realistic prospect that these things can be sorted out in the coming months or year or so, rather than more 3 or 4 years delay. Is that?
Yes, indeed. I mean, the concept is unfortunately a very complex one. There's a lot of details to be worked through, which is why it is generally quite a slow process. The habitats regulations is a very high bar, as you all appreciate. So we have to be certain in every circumstance that the proposed solution will deliver the mitigation. So yes, it's a necessarily detailed and complex process, but as long as we've got the correct figures and we've got the solution that is correctly evidenced with the appropriate level of detail, those should be able to be progressed.
And in terms of the process, so Provision referred to several months for the calculator to be fixed to deal with the SUDS issue. Is that your agreement?
That's not something I've communicated to anyone, so I need to check who's put that. It's not a very big issue. It is not likely to take very long to fix, but we will have to go back to Natural England for their approval again. So that's the only slight delay that might hold that up.
Okay. And the process thereafter, would you agree that it was as summarised by Provision there, that there was a series of steps that would then go through in terms of the habitat regulations assessment and Natural England's agreement before the permission could be granted? But those are all steps that if the calculator's there and there's agreement on the information that's been provided with the applicant, that you're satisfied with and then Natural England agree with, that's a matter of weeks and months to go through, not years.
Yes.
Yeah. And all that would apply to these other sites that may have been held up to varying degrees in the past. Things of moving in the right direction.
Yeah, indeed. We are moving towards unleashing, well, getting to grips with the backlog and starting to progress these applications.
Right. Okay. So in terms of the, yes, so there's also the point that this particular applicant hasn't been getting a response. That's because of the backlog of work.
Essentially, yes. And to be honest, we've been prioritising development of the calculator, but we are looking to get additional resources on stream to start assessing the applications.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Right. Do you want to carry on in terms of going through the sites in whatever order? I mean, is there anything else on the first few that you'd referred to where there was a nutrient issue? Is there anything else on any of those?
No, I mean, no, essentially they're all caught by the same.
Those Berkshire,
thing.
yeah.
As soon as the calculator is, and the solutions are in place, then things will get unlocked, but it's just the question of when.
It's a matter of when, and
Yeah.
and the past experience is that it can take a long time.
It can.
Yeah.
It can.
So does that take us on to the neighbourhood plans? The sites being brought forward in those and whether they'll be built by 2031. I think you raised doubts about that, or the.
Our point. So we made a couple of points. One was about the sites themselves, but the more general point is that Hungerford Town Council, I don't know if there is anybody on the Town Council here, but Hungerford Town Council on their website say that the plan is that their neighbourhood plan is delayed because they're waiting for the response from the council to their consultation. Once they have that, they intend to submit it for examination. Their timetable was indicating that would all happen by March 25, which to us seemed, from where we are now, seemed very optimistic, that you'd have a neighbourhood plan that's gone through all of that process that's reliant on, it seems, the local plan. So it's more just a general point, one probably for you to consider. What's going to come first, the local plan or the neighbourhood plan? And if the neighbourhood plan doesn't come forward until the local plan is adopted, as in to establish that housing requirement, what does that mean for then the delivery of the 55 units that would come forward from that local plan?
Yeah,
we obviously can't predetermine what the outcome of the neighbourhood plan itself would be in relation to the two sites that were in the Reg 14 draft, and also we can't predetermine what the outcome might be for any planning application that might come forward pursuant to But so it's more just a general point about the timing of it all.
Anything you wish to say about Sandalford Park?
I think I'll leave it at your comment. So it's just an ever fluctuating quantum, and it's very difficult for everybody, I think, to grapple with as to when that site will come forward. Faraday, I think, is next.
Yes, these are the commitments that aren't allocations: Faraday Road, Kelvin Road, Broadway, etc.
Sorry, I did just skip over one. RSA 1, the land north of College. I can confirm we do agree with that delivery of 31 in the 5 years. We actually are agents for that applicant, and we've had updates from our client that is consistent with the update that the council has.
Okay, one area of agreement. It's better than none, I suppose.
So 31 is deliverable. Faraday. So this is an interesting site. I mean, actually, we've acted for the developer of this site, and we did the Reserve Matters application some years ago. The site is really complicated with the leases, and if you did track back on an evening through all the different AMRs, you'll see this is in the AMR and then it's out the AMR. But the consistent comment's always been about the leases on the land, the car dealership businesses that are there. And our understanding is that they are long-term leases that would need to be terminated, not that they're going to expire in the next couple of years. They run on and they would need to be terminated to allow the development. So that's one reason the site hasn't come forward to date. And the other reason is just since the permission was granted, I believe in 2012 originally, the market, the demand, etc., has all changed. Our issue with including this site is you've got evidence from the council that's come from the agent that confirms the current permission isn't viable. So to include a number of 160, I'm not disputing it's a brownfield site, it's in the settlement, etc., but to include a specific number of units kind of preempts or predetermines what a future application might include. And we don't know, for example, the viability constraints that might dictate the housing numbers and to what extent might be market or affordable, etc. So I think the more reasonable in terms of the NPPF definition would be to put 0 from that site, and anything that does come forward is just treated as a large-scale windfall that goes into a subsequent 5-year supply at a subsequent point.
Yeah, okay, understood about that one. I mean, notwithstanding what they say about the agent Carter Jonas marketing it and there being interest and thinking about a scheme for 400, what are you saying? Well, there's no pre-app discussion, there's no applications being put in or, you know, hard evidence of that. Is that what you...
Exactly. There's no application at the moment that the extant consent, it's all accepted, it's common ground that that's not going to be viable. That won't be delivered.
They started from scratch on a brownfield site with some
It's
complications.
extant, so not disputing it wouldn't be a material consideration that the council's previously granted that permission on a subsequent development management decision. But for a local plan and considering the 5-year trajectory now, the site's not allocated for a particular number. So I don't see how you could put a number within the 5-year supply. It assumes a number of things happening, not least the lease is being terminated.
Yeah, understood. Okay, thank you. That's helpful. The Broadway.
The Broadway site, our evidence on that is inconsistent with the council, and the council in the statement of common ground on the appeal did say that that site would not be deliverable. And we had the final session on Monday and the council didn't indicate to the inspector that there was any change. The evidence is that the owner of the site is in administration and a new purchaser of that site and a new subsequent developer will need to be found. And that hasn't happened yet.
I think the council said that they do assume a reduction of 36 in the 5-year supply because that was the contribution.
That is in the note, but what's just been given to you verbally is that they actually...
No, I think they're saying, I think that what they were saying, I think my understanding is they do accept that the supply, the 5-year supply, it wouldn't make a contribution to the 5-year supply, but they do think it would make a contribution to the overall supply for the plan period.
Okay.
I think, is that what you were saying?
I think the council's position is that it could feed into the 5-year supply post-adoption. So the one difference between what we're talking about today and the evidence that was given in the inquiry that Ms Miles is talking about, I wasn't there, but I'm piecing this together, is that evidence was about deliverability within the current 5-year supply period, whereas we're looking slightly more crystal ball gazing further ahead. So that's one difference between the evidence you're hearing today and the evidence that was given there. But the other update that has come post the evidence that was given in the inquiry is that the council solicitor has confirmed that she's been chased by the solicitor for the applicant, the developer, about the section 106. And so the council's position is, well, you know, this shows progress. Why would a solicitor be being paid to be chasing the council solicitor, the council responding on that?
Could you just clarify either now or later today what the trajectory assumes this site is contributing? Because it's I've got a figure of 72's its capacity, and I've got a figure of 36 contribution for the supply that is or isn't being now assumed by the council. Could you just clarify what its contribution is? Maybe after we've had a break. Yeah. So is it 72, 36 or 0? I think seem to be the options. Okay, right. Let's move on.
Just the Bayer site.
Yes.
So the Bayer site, the prior approval has expired. So under the Part O, I believe it is, of Schedule 2, Part 3, when prior approval is granted, the development must be completed within 3 years, and that 3-year period has now passed. So the remaining 141 units can no longer be completed. I think my reading of the council's response is that they do accept that. The last line says the council, last paragraph says the council acknowledges the prior approval has not been completed within the 3-year period. My concern with then still relying on the 141 units in the 5-year post-adoption supply is that what's the mechanism to now deliver those 141 if it can't be done under prior approval? So it has to be done via a planning application. Planning applications bring into play planning policies. There might be affordable housing requirements or other kind of viability concerns. We don't know that 141 would definitely be delivered when assessed against a planning policy compliance.
Okay, my understanding of this one, and again, council can clarify, was that they didn't count the 141 in the 5-year supply between 2026 and 2031. But it may have been counted in the overall supply for the plan period, but earlier than that. So it never did contribute to the figure for that particular 5-year supply period.
No, it's in the trajectory.
It's in the
So I guess
trajectory
it
for the
depends
overall supply, I think.
What your conclusion is in terms of any updates or not to the trajectory itself. But if the trajectory is updated, that I don't think that site should be in the trajectory because the prior approvals
At all for the pipe.
Well, no, I mean, it's owned by the same, it's also in administration. It's the same company that's gone into administration, Featherfoot and Bayer, I believe. So it's also got to be sold. It's also got to go, to a new owner who will have their own proposal of what they will want to deliver, if at all, in the future. Okay.
Can you confirm that now that this doesn't make a contribution to the 5-year supply from 2026 to 2031, or do you need to? Is that?
It's not contributing. Yeah.
No, but you are assuming that it will make 141 for the plan period.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Okay. Right. Thank you for that, and apologies for everyone else who sit through that. But is there anything else that you wish to say? I think we've covered the sites that you had identified and the councils.
The only other thing is windfalls, but
yes.
I'm not sure if you're coming on to that.
Well, yes, there is a windfall assumption in the 5-year supply, isn't there? But it's also for the plan period. So I think, should we deal with it under the plan period as a general point about the evidence for it as a long-term thing? Because the contribution to the 5-year supply would be how many in this instance?
So there would be 700.
In the 5-year supply from 2026?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, it's the same figure, annual figure, and the reason for it you've explained, so we can come back to that. Okay, thank you. Right, anyone else want to comment on 5-year supply? Yeah, Paula Sanderson. Sorry, can you put the microphone on?
The land off Faraday Road and Kelvin Road, 160, was eventually decided that it was extant after a similar proposal to that's happening with RSA 20. A non-material amendment was put forward for the phasing of delivery by implementing an access road. In that case, the SUD's condition was not discharged during that process. So the council might need to be aware of that during the RSA 20 non-material consideration, because I think that was some of the reason why they were trying to decide whether it was extant or not. And also it's in a dedicated employment area.
Okay, thank you. Right. Anything else on the 5-year supply? I've got some more figures to think about. As I said before, this would be an ever-changing situation every time we look at this and look at further information. So I think what I'm saying is this will be the end of my consideration of it based on the information I have now, either a baseline of April 2024 or this information that's now we've discussed today. And I will form a view as to whether or not the council has identified a 5-year supply for the 5 years following adoption. The implications of which, well, there's two potential implications, isn't there? One, the soundness of the plan overall, which I'll make a judgment about, and secondly, whatever the implications of that may be for development management going ahead, depending on what NPPF says or doesn't say. So that's that. Let's have a break for 10 minutes, and then we'll come back and look at the other aspects of supply and for the longer term. But I think there's probably less to talk about than those details we've just been through. Okay, so let's resume at 5 past. just a minute, but is there that issue about the Broadway site 72, 36 or 0 in the 5-year supply? We got to the bottom of that.
Yep, I think based on the most recent information that the council now has on that site, it is 72 in 5 years post-adoption.
Okay, and is that included in this net increase figure of I referred to earlier that I've now lost?
No, I don't think it is, because we got that
No.
information yesterday.
Right. So, okay, so that net increase of 207 that I referred to included what contribution from the Broadway site? 30.
Yeah, referring to exam 56 as a decrease of 36, but we now saying that will be an increase of 72.
Okay, so originally it was 0,
Yeah,
then you thought 36, but based on the information that came in yesterday, it could go up by plus 72. Okay, right. Okay, right. Let's move on then to looking at the overall land supply. The latest trajectory in August, the overall comprehensive trajectory in August, showed a total supply of 10,143. That's correct?
correct.
Yeah. Now that may have moved on slightly based on this further information, but we'll maybe deal with that as we go through. But so anyway, that represented a surplus of 870 or so over the plan requirement of 9270.
Yeah, correct.
And that would represent a surplus of about 9%. And that compared to a figure of 8873 when we discussed the overall supply back in the earlier hearing sessions, which was one of the reasons it prompted me to sort of suggest the council needed to see if they could find some additional land supply. Yeah. So that at that time, the 8873. So that means it's increased by just over 1,200 or so between then and the new trajectory.
Yeah.
And the main components of that increase were North East Thatcham, that had gone up from 1,400 or so back when we discussed in May or June or whatever, up to the 1,700 or so, I think it is now, isn't it? Although it could be slightly higher based on the partnership. So that was an increase of 260, I think. Yeah, and then there was the new allocations that between them would be another 430 or so.
Yeah,
And then the broad location is assumed to contribute 650,
correct.
which, well, we've discussed them. I can form a view about, but it doesn't seem to me to be a broad location that is identified for development in this plan. Rather, it's identified as a broad location that could be brought forward in a future review of a plan. And then there was a couple of other tweaks here and there, I think, and then there could be some further changes. I suppose there are a number then that I just need to go back over about the contributions to the overall supply for the plan period. We don't need to talk about North East Thatcham again. We've got that. We talked about the allocation, the new allocations earlier today. So back to Sandalford Park, East and West, at the risk of going around in a circle, but on the principle of taking account of, you know, the latest information that is available by the developer's intention, they say there will be less delivered overall. You say, well, that may be the intention now, but we don't actually know what the hard evidence is for that. We do know what the clear evidence is about the immediate 5-year supply, and things could still on Sandalford Park East, we'll come on to. That's about a revised scheme with a lower density or a lower capacity. Sandalford Park West, I got a little bit confused about. There was an area of the site that isn't included in the planning application. Is that right?
Yes.
So it's a part of the allocation.
So it's part of the allocation, but not included in the kind of the site that we've got.
And
planning
what's that
permission.
got capacity for? I've got a figure of 120.
140, up to 140.
Oh, it's 140, right. So, but that, does that explain the difference between the 500 and the 360?
I think yes.
Do you want to just quickly clarify?
Come and join us.
Yes, okay, yeah, please do. So just to take a step back, the figure that the council assumed for the Sandalford Park West would be 500 for the plan period. I think.
That's what it is assumed.
Yes.
Yeah.
And an element of that is in a part of the allocation that is not within the current planning application.
That's right. Insofar as Sandalford Park West,
Yeah.
as it was an application at the time of the Sandalford Park East application,
Yes.
was a site that involved the current site plus another site which is not included, the Sandfoin site, otherwise known as, and that was for up to 500.
Yeah.
Right. At the moment, we've got the application up to 360,
Yeah.
which is for part of the site, and in getting the resolution, which we hope for it to be determined fairly shortly. We, in the final stage, we've got an extension of time till the end of November on the section 106 on the, at committee, the applicants indicated that as and when Sandfoin were to come forward, which we would expect reasonably to be within the plan period, to provide the balance of the dwellings, and they indicate up to 140. That's why the answer is what
Yeah,
you're
okay,
getting
understood.
on that.
So from your point of view, there's that extra bit of land and it
that's-
can still be
yes.
developed through
Yeah.
as part of the, so
Yes.
that one's still 500 in the longer term.
Yeah.
Okay, which brings us on to the Sandalford Park East, where it's slightly different situation, I think, is there not? Which was the Law Homes are suggesting that they're not here, aren't they? They're not represented here today, are they?
No, they're not. I
No.
don't think.
But what they seem to say is that actually it's going to be 800 on their land, not 1,000.
Yes, we have just approved, actually, just to be clear, we have just approved their phasing plan,
Yeah,
within which there is an estimate on the phasing plan of 785. However, it is not clear how that has been worked out. We're just trying to finalize the urban design code, but at the same time, we are discussing with them still potential of how they can maximize their units on site. So their permission remains for up to 1,000. They indicate themselves that they think on their calculations, which they have not shown us how those calculations have worked out, that they may be of the order of 785 based on the mix that is on the condition and the section 106. But as I say, we're discussing with them. They have some thoughts that how we can increase those numbers.
okay. So based on the permission and the size of the site and the council policies for the mix of dwellings, you still think there's potential for 1,000 in the longer term? Or up to 1,000?
Yes, I mean, the one thing that is for certain is the 80 extra care homes will go,
Okay,
because we got a deed of variation in, which would have been finalized by now, but now we're reinstating all the bit about the country park back into the section 106, which had been crossed out by the inspector for that to be transferred to the council. So we're just doing a bit more work on that. So those 80 homes are to go, because it was going to be a total of 1,080, if you recall.
Yeah.
Up to 1,000 plus that 80 as a
Okay,
separate
so-
element. But there is scope for up to 1,000, provided, and that's what they've got permission for. But they themselves are saying is up to 785 at the moment, not up to 785, a 785 calculation on their layout that which they have not shown us. But they also want to discuss with us how they can increase those numbers.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and that's where we are with that.
so
Really.
there's still
Yeah.
things to resolve.
That's right.
Yeah, okay.
But they're progressing at pace.
Hmm.
Most all their reserve matters discons, discharge of condition applications have been submitted, and the last 3 are still to be determined, hopefully within this month. And then they have indicated they are looking to submit their first reserve matters application for road infrastructure by February 2025, and their first reserve matters for their first phase next summer, June, July.
And it's that phasing that's been approved
Yeah.
that has led the council to conclude about the contribution to the 5-year supply that we talked about.
Yes, and insofar the phasing plan is a spatial plan.
Okay.
Because as they indicated, I think at the May session when we had back here, they are considering potentially to have 2 locations potentially of building on the site. And it's on that basis that I think the numbers have been put forward as they have indicated. But what it is at the moment in the supply is what the developers have indicated to be their likely way forward on the site.
Right, okay, that's
Thank you.
helpful. I think we'll park Sandford Park West there.
That's east, actually.
That's east.
Yes, sorry. It happens to me all the time, you know, and it's an east-west situation,
Which will bring me on to Turley and Donington New Homes. Do you want to say anything about this?
I feel like I'm in some sort of time warp talking about this, as you probably do. Hopefully, Nico, I think set out relatively fairly where things are. The current application for 360 is still pending determination. We need the 106 signed, but that seems to be an ongoing process. So the 500 dwelling application will be withdrawn. I would question whether there's 140 on the balance of that site. I imagine it may well be lower, but there's no one around the table regarding that at the moment. It would certainly need to come through Sandford Park West as well. In terms of Sandford Park East, I've noticed that Blaws have suggested, or the council has suggested on behalf of Blaws, that there'll be 2 outlets in the 5-year supply section. I haven't made a point on that, sir, but Blaws control that site, as you're aware, and obviously only have 1 outlet. In terms of the numbers, I think it's very clear. Blaws, as a national house builder, are saying they are going to deliver 785 homes on this site. I've never come across a house builder that would provide less houses than an up to permission allows. Just to sort of expand on that, sir, if I may, I would suggest the council have very limited controls in terms of increasing that number. The appeal decision refers to up to 1,000 dwellings plus the care facility. The policy for the site, CS3, refers to up to 2,000 homes, I think it is. There is no minimum number in the outline planning permission or in the allocation. And the site does have a number of constraints. That's the reality. There are various challenges around drainage and trees and all sorts of development control matters that have obviously led to Blaws, not just saying at the hearing statements as they did previously, but they've now submitted a phasing plan that the council themselves have approved. And you'll recall, sir, and I know it's not before the examination, but I did draw your attention to the council's evidence to provisions Burfield Common appeal, where the council themselves are relying on 785 as the number for this site in this section 78 appeal. So it's a bit of a mess, sir, to be honest with you. But the reality is the numbers that are being talked about today are significantly reduced by somewhere in the order of about 330 dwellings on Sandford Park as a whole.
Okay, thank you. I think
you probably got the point now, so hopefully. Thank you.
Got the point several times. I think the numbers seem to shift slightly each time, but I mean we've got the gist. Okay, so that's that. So North East Thatcham, we've discussed the new allocation, Sandford Park, East and West. We've had suggestions from Provision that I think really that I ought to be discounting Faraday Road and buy a house because of the lack of any, they're brownfield, they may be brownfield windfall sites in effect, but you're starting from scratch in essence, that the schemes that may have had permission are not now going to go ahead, and there's nothing to indicate what numbers may be or anything else in effect. I think that's, so I think you'd be saying 300 off the plan supply on that basis, wouldn't you?
That's a fair summary, sir. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, so I've noted that. Which, unless is there any other sites that anybody wishes to talk about? No. Okay, well, let's just deal with the windfalls again. The plan assumes 140 based on past trends, small sites only.
Correct.
You told me previously, and you still say you wouldn't want to make just try and justify a numerical figure for overall windfalls, but you have now referred to a figure of 380 on large, medium and small over, I don't know what period, 2006 to 2023, is that right?
No.
No?
No.
I just made that up. Okay, forget that then. What you have said is that the reference to recent completions on small site windfalls has been lower than the 140, is that right? But that's acknowledged in the government's position in terms of completions falling off post-COVID.
Reflecting the COVID, the pandemic, where there was a drop.
So you maintain that a long-term, and we've talked about this before, and there's been peaks and troughs and, you know, whatever, you can take median averages or whatever, but you still think that a small site allowance of 140 is justified, and that there will be additional windfalls over and above that, even if I've just made up a figure there from somewhere. He did provide some information about overall windfalls.
I'm so sorry.
Okay. Right. It was in your response to AP 77, whenever that was. That was back in August. Anyway, provision. Anything you want to say? Anything more that anybody wants to say about windfalls? You mentioned earlier.
Only in, I mean, I note the council's response here, but actually in our written statement to you, sir, we said that it was, we looked back at the historic period, and it was only 5 of the 16 years in the historic period that the council actually met that delivery rate. So we maintain that it's optimistic at 140 based on the past trends and historic position, and that the rate should be lower.
Okay. Town, you no, okay.
I was just going to make an observation because I haven't heard it mentioned. I'm not sure to what extent it's within your remit, but there's a site we know as Dewson's £28 Lane, which got approval for as a windfall site, I think, in the centre of Newbury. That's 79 houses. And there's another planning application coming before the committee tomorrow with a recommendation to approve, which is Eagle Quarter, which you might know as the Kennett Centre. That's 427 houses in that application. So without wishing to comment on the merits of those, I think those are factors that would be material in the overall supply, potentially relevant in the supply of windfall houses. Thank you.
Well, what do those two individual developments tell us that they are, that things continue to come forward?
Yeah, exactly. In general terms, yeah, yes, those are quite large. They are significant in the overall total, and I haven't heard the name those particular sites mentioned specifically in previous discussions. So I just draw your attention to them to the extent it's relevant. Thank you.
Okay, right. Paula Sanderson.
That's exactly what I was going to say. 67 agreed last week, 400. So there's another 500 windfall units happening within the space of a month. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thanks. Right, so I can go away and come to a conclusion about the overall supply and the 5-year supply based on what we've had discussions today and the information I've got. At the moment, the council position is that there is a surplus over the requirement for the planned period. I have to say that I'm not very convinced about this 650 north of the broad location north of Newbury. I don't know if you want to have a final try and convince me about how that is part of the supply identified in this plan.
I'm not sure that we're going to be able to convince you right now, because to be completely honest with you, it hadn't it hadn't crossed our minds until you mentioned it just a little while ago. And looking back over the paperwork that we've looked at and the questions that have been asked, it seemed to be that that's where where we were going. Is it possible if we can have a little bit of time to think about that?
You can. It's just I do want to. I can see, but the danger is if the decision was made to embark on some sort of, well, I don't know if it would be additional allocations. I think from what you said today, it wouldn't be additional allocation, but it may be some sort of policy mechanism whereby sites could potentially be brought forward in a broad location. It just seems another step in evolving this plan in a way that is sort of incremental sort of modification that's getting quite significant. I know it ties in with the spatial strategy and the sort of justification. Leave it with me and I'll give you some guidance.
That would be helpful, but thinking about it, the broad location was intended to be identified in accordance with NPPF.
Yeah.
For the later part of the plan period. I know what you're saying is that now the council seems to be identifying that it would be in a different local plan, but it may not be in a different local plan. It's either a review or an update. It's still considered to be identified for later in the plan period.
Yeah, I mean, it's this rather bizarre thing, isn't it, where we're told we've got to identify land supply for 15 years, but actually you've got to review your plan every 5 years. So there's always this kind of sort of different ways of looking at things, aren't there?
Yes.
Yes. But that's where we are. And NPF does talk about broad locations can contribute to the longer term supply from years 6 to 10 and 11 to 15.
And the wording of that in terms of Para 69 is that planning policies should identify supply of specific deliverable sites for 5 years following the intended date of adoption. But then in relation to the Part B of that, specific developable sites or broad locations for growth, it's not specific at all.
No, but it does imply to me that the broad location, the plan should be facilitating development within that broad location and allowing for it. That plan allowing for it, I think, would, otherwise I would sort of say, well, it's not actually really permitting, it's not facilitating development in that broad location in this plan.
So if we understand your concern is this plan, the broad location being identified should be in this plan for this plan.
Well, it could be subject to certain, things being met, couldn't it? But again, the danger I see of going down this route is we're going to come back here in 3 months' time because the council's come up with another policy that needs discussing, and so I think you may just want to pause and think, and I need to pause and think about the best way of being expedient about this examination and this plan, and particularly, to be honest with you, in the context of where I don't know if you want to say anything about it, but the new standard method does give this council, and the new standard method combined with what I understand national policy to be about authorities that are significant away from that new standard method, it's challenging them to go through prepare a new plan, is it not?
Maybe, but I think there's a danger in putting too much weight on what may or may not happen at the moment. We don't know.
No.
And this
is know by Christmas.
There's been indications we might not know by Christmas,
we don't.
And this is a very constrained authority. And I heard what you said earlier about it lurking in the background. Yes, it is lurking in the background, but I think we need to deal with the policy that's in front of us right now and worry about the standard method changing when that happens.
Yeah. Well, we do need to worry about the policy that's before us, and that's the submitted plan and how I decide it needs to be modified pragmatically. And, this plan does a number of things, and it does lots of things, which it may, even if it didn't identify sufficient supply for the plan period, it still does insignificant things, even if it were to be adopted hence my deliberate statement that I hadn't reached a conclusion about this. It's been very helpful today to talk about the sites and the things that you helpfully proposed as a council to try and improve the supply in the plan. So I will go away and have a think about those. But quite honestly, I think I'd say this now. I think it's important that this plan gets adopted in the short term, whatever may then follow in the years to come, which is your concern, but probably not mine. So that's where I'll just, put a marker down, really, I think, on that. So I just hesitate slightly to invite you to start going down another policy.
That's noted.
thing without me giving an indication. I'd just like you to think about it, and I'll think about it as well. Turley.
So thank you for that, I think. I'm mindful of all the discussions we've had, and obviously we've been looking at the back end of the plan period and making sure that there's sufficient supply throughout. I'm mindful of that paragraph 69B point, but I'm also mindful, sir, of the paragraphs I referred you to earlier, paragraphs 22 and 23 of the NPPF that talk about broad location, looking beyond the plan period. So, noting, as I said earlier, the direction of travel with national policy, I think it is helpful to acknowledge the potential in that area. I appreciate what you're saying, but the wording of paragraph 23 in particular seems quite clear that it facilitates the ability to identify locations on a key diagram in a local plan in terms of where things might go in the future. So if I can just, I know you're aware of them, sir, but I just feel duty bound to flag that to you now.
Yes, okay, thank you. Right, any final comments from anyone else today? We are back tomorrow on 2 discrete matters separate to this. So unless anyone's got anything further to say about housing land supply and the allocations, etc., we'll draw a line there. So thank you, and I'll see some of you again tomorrow.